Hello and welcome back to DivideTheWord.blog. My name is Ralph Brickley and I'm glad to have you here with me today. Today's message or topic is going to be about why performance-based religion fails people. And this is something I wrote on my blog quite a while ago, so I'm going to put a link to that article down in the notes of this video. And I hope at the end you'll like this, share it, and subscribe to our channel if you found this useful. But the topic of why performance-based religion fails people is something that really started chewing on me a while back, and I heard a song on the radio by a group called Love and the Outcome, and the song is The God I Know. And it's one of those catchy tunes you hear on the radio. It doesn't really mean much in the moment, but in a moment where I was chewing on a thought and the words of the first verse came to me, I had to write them down, and then I later went and found the song, and I'm going to play a clip of the first verse for you here to get the point across.
If it was all about religion, what to do, what to say, what to wear on a Sunday, all about perfection, black and white, wrong or right, never great, well I never make it, I'd never be good enough.
I'd never be good enough. This is the crux of why performance-based religion fails people. It fails Christians, it fails faith, and most importantly, it fails the God who came to give us faith, who came to give us Christianity, who came to give us hope. And that is the crux of what I began to chew on in my legalistic background, 15 years in a oneness Pentecostal church. You could really never be good enough. Sin was a hardcore topic, and I believe in the Christian church it's not taught enough sometimes. But we failed to realize that God knew we were going to never be good enough, and He made a way for us to find a mediator and find a way to gain forgiveness of sin. It was the reason Jesus Christ came, and it was the reason the Bible says that we have a mediator after we fall. As a matter of fact, the Scripture says, 1 John 2:1, "My little children, these things I write unto you, that you sin not. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous." And certainly there's nothing wrong with trying to find perfection, trying to aspire to be better than we were yesterday. But the problem with the mentality of some people in a spiritually abusive church or a legalistic church, in the oneness Pentecostal church I was in, was that only the man of God had attained perfection. He had perfection, and everybody else was below him, and we were all unable to gain that perfection. And of course we were taught to get it though, and so our eyes were always judgmental. If somebody didn't rise up to the level we were at, they were beneath us, we of course judged them, and often harshly. And it was just wrong. It's not the Christian message God came to give. And I want to talk about some of the examples of performance-based religion and why it's failed people. So number one, the reason performance-based religion fails people is that it creates a graduating scale of your value to the church. And ultimately that translates into your value to God. If you're not performing well enough, you cannot be used in ministries of the church, and then you cannot have intrinsic value to God. In my oneness Pentecostal church, all the young boys and young girls had assigned seating. And if you were 12 years old and up, never married, never have children, so you hadn't created any kind of moral sin, then you were to sit in these youth group areas. The boys on the left, the girls on the right. And you always knew when somebody had messed up, because they'd be back sitting with their parents in the parents' spot, head down, looking shamed. And it was a way for us to create conformity. If you want to have the honor of sitting up there with your peers, you better behave just right. You better be perfect. You better not ever mess up. And when you mess up, we're going to pull you out of that honor and make sure everybody knows it. Likewise, in choirs, we had kids choirs, youth choirs, you always knew when somebody messed up because they'd say, "We'd like the youth choir to come up and sing now." And all of them would file up to the platform and get in their perfectly aligned positions, except for the one person stuck back there in the assigned seating because they messed up somehow. And now they didn't have a dunce cap on, but they're the sore thumb sitting there. And so everybody knew they messed up. So again, number one, The reason performance-based religion fails people is that it creates a value structure of on a graduating scale. If you perform this well, this is your value. If you perform this well, this is your value. And you can't teach youth Bible studies or youth services, etc., if you've had one of these events. And what do I mean by these events or messing up? Well, somebody caught you watching TV, or somebody caught you slipping into the public pool to go swimming, or God forbid, a young person held hands with another young person, or even more forbidden, they kissed, or maybe you got in trouble at school, or maybe you just weren't worshiping correctly in service, right? Your spiritual strength was being called into question. If you weren't running the aisles, which is, if you've never experienced Pentecost, when the preacher shouts really loud and gets things going, people get up and they literally run laps around the sanctuary. It's running the aisles. If you're not jumping up and down, if you're not speaking in tongues, if you're not worshiping exuberantly, getting sweaty, your spirituality is called into question, and they begin to wonder, is something wrong with you? And so then they kind of stop using you in certain ways until they see you really getting more spiritual. So that, again, that's the first way spiritual performance-based religion fails people. The second way that it fails people is it creates an aura of shame. I remember multiple times that young people would be made to stand up, and old people, just somebody who failed in a dramatic way. And again, this could be caught watching movies, or two young people kissed and they got caught. Didn't maybe go to a sexual sin, just kissed. And in our church, that was considered almost like having sex. So they would have this somber service, and you knew somebody was about to get whooped. From the moment the service started, just the spirit and the aura of the place was heavy, and it was dark, and it was strong, and then the preacher had an angry look on his face, and he wasn't smiling or giving a message of hope. It was this is God's curse, and look what happened to so-and-so and Achan when he hid his sin. Look how God destroyed his family, and it was just this curse after curse after curse. And at the very end, somebody would have to stand up in the back or the front of the church and in front of everybody express their apologies for the sin they committed and the example it shed upon our church and how it affected everybody. And we created this shaming, public shaming atmosphere where when you did have a sin problem or you had a temptation problem, you didn't open up and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. I could use some accountability and help. Because when your sin came to light, you got publicly shamed. And when you're publicly shamed, what is your number one reaction? Hide it. Hide it. Avoid that negative behavior. This is how performance-based religion fails people. We can't get the help we need. We don't have a support structure around us. We have a group of cannibals who are just waiting to catch us sinning or failing or messing up and then turn us in and get us in trouble, all under the idea that we're going to save your soul. And so people hide their sin. They hide their temptation. They don't get help. They don't talk about it. They don't reach out to somebody. And then ultimately that will lead to a crash and burn effect. And then they're out of the church, and then they're the backslider, then they're the outcast. Then we hear the stories, so-and-so was addicted to video games, and that took him out of the church. And video games, cigarettes, tobacco, sex, sin, that doesn't take you out of the church. Your heart takes you out of the church. And when you don't have help for your heart and your soul and your spirit, you're being destroyed systematically from the inside. And so performance-based religion fails people because it creates public shaming and it creates a system where you cannot get help, you cannot get support. And this is a dire, dire problem in the legalistic side of churches, and we've got to figure out a way to get past that. We have to pray against it, we've got to talk against it, we've got to operate against it, make sure that we're not behaving in that fashion, and go forth teaching the message of hope that Christ came. And God, who so loved the world, He didn't judge us based on our performance. He judged us and loved us based on the fact that we were His creation and His children. He so loved us that instead of casting us away and making us stand up in front and put on our dunce cap and publicly shaming us. And by the way, I'll put a link to my article in the notes to this video about public shaming and why it doesn't belong in Christianity. But God didn't use that method. When they brought the adulteress to Jesus and said, "Ha, it's time to publicly shame this woman," what did he do? He kept his mouth shut. And then when they pushed and pushed and pushed, he said, "All right, every one of you who's never sinned and you're guiltless, go ahead and pick up rocks and cast the first stone." Jesus didn't practice public shaming. He practiced public forgiveness. And that's what we as Christians should be about. So I hope you like and subscribe to this video. I hope it helps somebody. Read the blog article at dividetheword.blog. It's got a few more notes in here that I'm keeping out for brevity. But we hope that God would bless people through these videos, help you to realize that you can come out of these situations. And if it's something that you've been affected by to the point like I was, that I was practicing these things, I was part of the system, to help you get out of it and realize there is a better way. God bless you. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you at the next video.